Good evening. Evening. Just as a little protocol, a couple things. First, we are also live streaming this. So this is going everywhere in Tuvalu as well, online. And after Mr. Talia's presentation, there will be a time for question and answer. And so you'll have the opportunity to be able to have a little Q&A. What you'll just do then is raise your hand so I can make the microphone, give you the microphone, and we can go from there. But it is, for over a decade, Mr. Maina Talia has been advocating for a strong response to climate change, a dire threat to his homeland, Tuvalu. Beginning as climate change officer for the Congregational Christian Church of Tuvalu, he currently holds the position of Tuvalu Climate Action Network Secretary. In both these positions, he focuses on climate change and theology merged with indigenous issues in Tuvalu. Mr. Talia has attended several United Nations conferences on indigenous issues in New York and Geneva. He has served on the Tuvalu government delegation to 6 of the last 10 UN climate change conferences of the parties. This year, he will be attending COP27 in Egypt. Mr. Talia is married to, help me with her name? Leihane. I butchered it. They have 4 children. He holds a Master of Theology degree with an emphasis on climate change and theology. Mr. Talia is currently a doctoral student. In fact, he just submitted his dissertation at the Charles Sturt University in Australia, and it is our privilege to be able to welcome him this evening. Mr. Talia.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Michael, for that kind introduction, and especially thank you so much for coming, and I hope you will enjoy my presentation and would love to further engage in the Q&A part. I would also like to extend a word of thanks to PCUSA for the invitation to come to the US and continue to advocate on behalf of our people, not just in Tuvalu, but those who suffer the adverse impact of climate change. Thank you so very much. I have entitled my presentation, The Climate Crisis, Climate Change, and Tuvalu Plea for Survival. As Mike introduced me, I am from Tuvalu. I was in Sydney studying in Australia, but I don't live in Australia, I live in Tuvalu. So after all this tour and event, I will go back to Tuvalu. Before I jump into my presentation, especially talking about climate change, related sea level rise, and other issues that are pertinent to the survival of our people, I would like to show you this short clip that will give you a glimpse of what climate change is all about. People might be thinking, oh, climate change is not real. Some will continue to deny the reality of climate change, related sea level rise, but pay attention to this short clip. This event happened in 2015 on my island, Waitupu, and please watch this short clip. Sorry that I did not put any audio into the clip. It seems to be dry, but the clip, it's not dry, it's wet. Since time is not on our side, I will share the video with your pastor, and you can have time to watch it over and over again. But as of now, I will try to move on to my presentation. At least you have a glimpse of what I'm talking about and what I will be talking about. Or just before we proceed with the presentation, is anyone volunteer to come and stay with me for 2 weeks? But you make sure you bring your life jacket with you when you come to the island? Well, those who deny climate change, they should come and live with me for at least 2 weeks and see it to yourself. And you can decide whether you believe in climate change or not. But this is the reality of life that we are going through. It's totally a new phenomenon for us. You can see the day was totally a fine day, no wind, nothing else, and all of a sudden we experienced this, although it's associated with the cyclone Pam, but this kind of wave, we don't normally experience them. So, and this is literally beyond our control and beyond our capacity to respond as well, given the limited resources that we have as an island. Tuvalu was used to be called the Gilbert and Ellice Island colony in the past. And when we became independent from the British on the 1st of October 1978, we called ourselves Tuvalu. And Tu means to stand, Valu means 8. So literally there are 8 islands standing together in the vast Pacific Ocean. Tuvalu is just to the north of Fiji, if you can see it on the map. It's a bit far from Australia, but south of the equator. And it's the north of Fiji. It's a very small island with at least 8 islands. Another island was counted under another island, so it's literally, we say Tuvalu, 8 islands standing together. And with a total land mass of area of 26 square kilometers of land. With a population of around 10 to 11,000 people, about 4,000 to 5,000 people are now residing in New Zealand and other parts of the world, such as Australia, Hawaii, and Fiji. And some of them are in the States, but with a very a small number of them. Well, we were evangelized or Christianized by the London Missionary Society, which is now called the Council for World Mission, which is also part of the, Tuvalu is part of the World Council of Churches, WCC. And up until now, it's around 92% of the total population belongs to the church called the Ecclesia Galiciano Tuvalu, or the Tuvalu Christian Church. It is a mixed tradition, Presbyterian, Methodism, Congregationalism, and so forth. It is a mixed tradition. We have Catholics in the island, but it's a very small number of them. And also a bunch of new religious groups. In terms of resources, we don't have anything to export. All we do is the revenues that we receive and also the remittance that we have received from our families and those who live abroad, sending over money to support their island communities and the church as well as their families. So those are some of the revenue that we continue to receive. Apart from that is the .tv, is the domain name assigned to us, like .au, which is stand for Australia, the suffix, and also .fj, which stands for Fiji. So the domain name that was allocated to us was .tv. And .tv, we get quite a lot of money out of .tv. Millions, we're talking about millions here. So some of our people may think that, oh, it's a blessing from God because it comes from heaven. You know, it's something to do with satellites and something to do with the domain of the internet. It's a blessing anyway. It's a labor without sweat. And also, the other revenue that we receive in Tuvalu is from fisheries or fishing licensing. Those who come to fish in our EEZs, or the exclusive economic zone, we give them license, and it's quite a good amount of money that we receive from those licensings, and it helps the government of Tuvalu in terms of their budget and other things that need to be done for the betterment of our community. The issue of internal displacement is also another issue that we are facing at the moment. Because you can see on the map, it's just a small strip of island, and that is our capital, Funafuti. You can see the runway right in the middle of the island. So internal displacement is another issue. How many times do we have to move further inland? Or how long do we have to continue to relocate or displace or uprooted from the shorelines to move further inland, given it's just a strip of land? Otherwise, we will end up in another side of the ocean. So it's an issue that we are also facing at the moment, and it's a challenge for all of us, because land, for us, it's something that we cannot buy. You cannot purchase land in Tuvalu. We only pass on those lands to our children and their grandchildren and so forth. Nobody can buy lands in Tuvalu. You can exchange land, but you cannot purchase any land in Tuvalu. I just want to go through some of the challenges that the Pacific countries are facing, which is also similar to Tuvalu. And one of the issues to do with Tuvalu is our disappearance and the question of ownership. If Tuvalu will go down today or totally submerge because of climate change-related sea level rise, who will take ownership of our exclusive economic zone, of our marine resources? Given the absence of any international law to do with a country submerged from the face of the earth, we don't know who's going to take ownership of that particular maritime zone. So it's another issue that we are facing at the moment too, when worse come to worse and we have to give up our islands. But that's not something that we anticipate to happen in the future. All we are doing at the moment, we're trying our best to save our country. We're trying our best to save the place we call home. Because if we happen to relocate and move somewhere else, we have no reference point. We have no place to be called home. We can live in Australia or New Zealand, but we are homeless. We have no place to refer to as home. Even for those who became refugees from the Middle East that travels all the way to the Pacific, even though they are refugees, but they still have a place to call home. I'm from there. They do have a reference point. But for us, if Tuvalu totally submerged and we end up in the United States, Hawaii, or anywhere else, we have no reference to tell our children and our grandchildren that is where we come from. That is home. And that is why we continue to fight and tell our story to the international community, the church, to different churches in the world that, there are some people living in Tuvalu and other low-lying atolls, not only in the Pacific, but some other parts of the world that are highly impacted by climate change. So these are some of the issues that our Pacific countries are facing at the moment. But basically for Tuvalu and Kiribati and the Marshall Islands that are very, very low, because we are not more than 5 meters above the sea. Sometimes they make fun of us. Whenever they cross a road bump, a hump, they will say, oh, this is the highest point on the island. So it's a joke that our visitors normally say when I take them around and say, oh, Maina, is this the highest point in the island? I said, yeah, this is the highest point in the island. So it's pretty scary in some times when it comes to cyclone season towards the end of the year, this period of time. But what else can we do? Colonialism, communalism, but not colonialism. You can see on the picture is Kate and William when they visited Tuvalu. The reason why I put it up on the screen is not about colonialism or the monarch visiting Tuvalu, but despite the fact that we are facing all of this, you can see they are dancing and putting a happy face when, despite all of these challenges that we are facing in life, we still continue to come as a community. We continue to sing as a community. We continue to mourn as a community. So this communal way of living is very strong in the island. There is no poverty in Tuvalu. There is no such thing called people living on the street. We only face hardship in life. The reason being is the fact that we help one another. We live in a strong bond of what it means to be in a community. So that's why, despite all of these troubles, despite all of these challenges that we are facing in life, our people can still dance their fatele, they can still put a happy face, and they can still enjoy the life that they have lived in many, many years, for many, many years. During high tide or during king tide, this is what the community is facing. And this is right in the middle of the island. And it's an old photo, but I want to demonstrate that it is not easy because the intrusion of water that seeped through the whole island, or not the whole island, but most part of the island, were occupied by people. The challenge of planting is an issue now, and it's difficult for them to plant because of seawater intrusion. We used to drink out of well water or bore water, underground water, but now it's totally different. We can't consume because it's no longer the quality that we used to have back in the days, because of the waterlands, because of the disturbance of the waterlands by the salinity of water. So we are going through many, many challenges. And when it comes to drought, we get assistance from Australia and New Zealand. I'm not criticizing Australia and New Zealand, but my point that I want to make is the fact that it shouldn't be just a bottle of water. It shouldn't be just coming in when we need. But this is nothing to do with Australian. This is something to do with us. We call them for support. We call them for help. But I think it's more than that. It's more than just bringing water bottles into the country. It's about genuine partnership and how we can prepare way before drought. Because this is going to be the norm. Drought is going to be frequent, intensified. Tropical cyclone is going to be intensified. What are the plans in place? So these are some of the issues that we are also going through. What is the moral behind bringing water into the country? And these are some of the challenges that our people face when during king tide, but this picture was taken in 2015 during Cyclone Pam. Most of those who live on the shorelines have to relocate. But they've been there many, many years. Now they have to relocate to find a safe place for them. Communities and the government came up with ideas in terms of raised gardens as a way to respond to seawater intrusion. So these are some of the ideas that our communities are doing in order for them to respond and also for them to continue to have some veggies for them to survive. Yeah, people may say that we are on the same boat. Don't worry, Maina will pray for you guys. Tuvalu will be in God's hand. And there was also a common slogan that, we are fighting, we're not drowning. but I think that time has passed. We need to be very critical in the way we address climate change in the Pacific as well as any other parts of the world, because literally we are not in the same boat. We can be in the same boat, but we are not sailing the same storms of life. So it is difficult when my Christian brothers and sisters continue to say, oh, Maina, we'll remember you in prayers. I go home saying, oh, please don't just pray for me. Do something for us. Because sometimes we're really good in praying, but we fail to do or act as responsible Christians. Sometimes we tend to hide behind prayers, but we forgot to act for those who are in need. Migration with dignity was something that President Arnaud de Tong came up with, the former president of Kiribati. If we are to relocate because of climate change, we don't want to be called climate refugees or displaced refugees. For something that we did not cause and we bear the price, I think it is unfair for us to be called climate refugees, because our contribution to climate change in Tuvalu is almost next to nothing, 0.000001, but yet we suffer at the expense of the other. So these are the challenges that we are facing at the current situation. And if we are to relocate, if we are to move, we should be given the dignity. We should move as a dignified community. We should be given all the rights to live just like the citizen of a country. We don't want to become second-class citizen in another country. For something that we did not cause, I think it is unfair to be called climate refugees. And it's also very unfair to be second-class citizen in another country, especially in big polluting countries. And during Cyclone Pam in 2015, this is one of the pictures from the island of Nui. Most of the graves were unearthed. And I think the simple message that our foreparents want to highlight to us, and those who have gone before us, please, if you are planning to leave Tuvalu, take us with you. And now we come to a very interesting part of the presentation, I would say. Noah and climate change, a deep theological crisis that we are also going through. We do workshop with our elders and, you should just listen to them. They will say, Maina, no, there's no flood. There's no climate change. God promised Noah that he will never send any more flood to destroy humanity. We cannot blame them. That's their colonial faith. That's their colonial way of reading the Bible. That's how they were taught by the colonial missionary of the days. And it's very difficult for us to convince the elderly in our communities. They said, nah, climate change is not real. We believe in God. We believe in the story of Noah. Despite the fact we've been telling them, no, let's sit down and start rereading the story of Noah. Try to contextualize the story. Try to read it as a Tuvaluan. Yet they cling on to their faith in a God that was introduced to them as a colonial project of the past. People, I think this is a very important sequence for us Tuvaluans. And you can see on the picture, the sea is our freezer or refrigerator. Before the introduction of electricity in Tuvalu, we go fishing and we distribute with our neighbors. The introduction of electricity and the introduction of refrigerator, we start thinking inwardly. Why do we have to fish and distribute to the community if we can just store them for the next 3 or 4 days in our freezer? So despite the fact that we do not want to follow the Western lifestyle, but we are gradually accepting it as part of who we are as Tuvaluans. So it's disturbing community, disturbing our values as well. But there are still communities in Tuvalu, there's still families in Tuvalu that continue to cling on to their traditional way of living, upholding their traditional values share and care with the community. Because who we are as a community in Tuvalu does not define by individualism. It defines by our collective rights. There is no such thing in Tuvalu called individual rights. Yeah, of course, the UN is telling us that we should uphold the individual rights. Of course, the government of Tuvalu is telling communities that human rights should be the core focus of anything, that core focus of development. But yet, when we go to the communities, when we talk to our elders, they said, no, there is no such thing called individual rights in the island. All we know is collective rights. We live as a community. We mourn as a community. We dance as a community. There is no such thing called individual human rights on the island. So we can see all of this because the reason that I raised the issue of individual rights and communal rights or collective rights, because it defines who we are as a people, as a person, as self, as a being, as a Tuvaluan, as a Pacific Islander. So the sequence between people, land, ocean, God equals life is important for us. Because land, if a mother gives birth to a child, the placenta will be buried in the land. And even the umbilical cord, if detached from the baby, we bury it in the land and we plant a coconut tree. Because the placenta in the mother, it's literally giving nutrient, providing support to the baby, and we view land as just like the placenta. That's why we don't throw the placenta into the bin. We bury the placenta. We bury the umbilical cord of a baby. That it really re-intensify, re-signify our connection with the land. So that's why when we talk about land in Tuvalu, we're not simply talking about just a barren land. No, we are literally talking about people living on the land and those who are resting in the land, those who have gone before us that are resting in the land. So if people from outside come and tell us, you can just get up and go to Australia, go to New Zealand, abandon your island. Life is more important than saving your island. It's not easy for us. Because when we're talking about leaving our island, we are simply talking about our grandparents, my mother who have passed, that are buried in the land. We cannot just get up and go. There are a lot of moral complexities, legal complexities when we start talking about migration. But that is not what we want to happen to us. We want to maintain. We want to stay in our islands. It's too premature for us to throw in the white towel and get up and go. We're still pleading and asking the international community to understand our case. Because we don't want to move. That's what other people think. Because we can move, of course. That's easy. We'll just get up and go. But that does not put a stop to climate change. The culprits will continue to burn fossil fuels. So we really need to think seriously about that. I don't know whether you can read. Can you see and read? If I may ask that if we can read, this is a theological statement that was produced in 2016 and endorsed by the General Assembly of the Church in Tuvalu in 2016. It's a theological statement. I can share the big theological statement, but I have extracted some of it, which are relevant for our discussion this evening. And may I kindly ask if you kindly read for us. Or shall I read it? Can we read together? Yeah, please.
We are also wary of the capitalist wisdom, which now proposes a new agenda of fixing the environment. We are wary of the impacts of sustainability, proposals such as planting trees, changing light bulbs, tapping renewable energy sources, and
Who are we trying to save? Are we trying to save the islands? Are we trying to save the people from Tuvalu and other low-lying atolls? Or our switch to renewable energy is just to save the capitalist? So these are some of the politics behind renewable energy. Or are we really trying to solve the climate crisis? I'm not demanding any answers, but I want to point out those very important points that we can go home and think about it. And then raise the question of, where are you, God? You know, we were taught in Sunday school that God is everywhere. We were also taught that we should say God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. Yes, of course. But islands are sinking. People are dying in the world. Every day people are dying because of hunger. The war in Ukraine and Russia. And yet we continue to sing God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. Islands are sinking. I'm not challenging our traditional faith. I'm challenging our traditional understanding of structures, traditional understanding of systems that really cause the death of the environment and its ability to respond to the human beings. So that system, which we call God, sometimes very problematic, and it's a theological concern for all of us. If we are trying to defend God in all this scenario, if we are trying to defend God in all these problems, I think we are not in a place to defend God. We should allow God to be God, and we should respond to the social problems that we are facing at the present time. But these are some of the questions that we are going through. We are asking ourselves in Tuvalu, what have we done wrong? What have we done wrong to make God mad at us? What have we done wrong to make God angry with us? Why do we have to suffer? Why do we have to submerge? Why do we have to pay the price for something that we did not do? So these are some of the challenging questions that our Christian community are also facing at the present time. And the second part is the from Tuvalu to the International Forum, which I believe is very important, why we attend conferences, why I'm here speaking to you. It's important. It's important because it puts climate change into reality, speak truth to power, and we also keep our government accountable, which is very important. And that's, you can see on the pictures, different countries in the Pacific attending conference of the party under the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the highest decision-making body on climate change. We are there to advocate. We are there to tell our story, despite the fact that we are fatigued. We are tired of telling this story over and over again, but it's important that we are present there. It's important that no other people will speak on our behalf. Let us speak, let us tell our story. And this is why it's important for us to advocate for our community. Because I'm not speaking about on behalf of my family. I am speaking for those who does not have the opportunity to come and address different communities. Not Without My Neighbor was a theme that we've been working closely with, that theme for the past COPs meetings, trying to mobilize the concept of duakoi and neighbor. What does it mean to be neighbor in the context of geopolitics and climate change? Especially when we read the Luke 10, 25 to 37, which talks about the story of the Good Samaritan. Most of us does not link climate change and the Good Samaritan. But this is very important when we read the Good Samaritan parable, because Jesus was talking about a specific man, a specific neighbor that came from Jericho to Jerusalem. So when it comes to climate change, we are also we need to be very specific with our neighbor. Because neighbor is no longer someone living next door to you as a neighbor, but it's a geopolitical neighbor. It's a person that is being impacted by your action and my actions. That is a neighbor. That is your neighbor. That is my neighbor. After our side event in Madrid, Spain, the Prime Minister of Australia in the following day responded to our side event on the media. So I'm glad that we are making some impact and we are moving forward on this issue. And this is my niece. I want to live without fear of climate change. And I think that concludes my presentation. Let us all help Tuvalu, help low-lying atolls, be the voice for the voiceless. Go and tell. Talk to your politicians that these people have all the rights not to remain silent. They have all the rights to remain on their islands. And in terms of our working relationship with PCUSA, these are some of the things that we can work towards it. In terms of establishing our working relationship with local communities or local churches in the island, we can look into safe food security and food safety projects, adaptation projects, or even some exchange programs. That's something we can talk about it later. But as of now, thank you so very much for listening.
Mr. Talia, thank you so much for your presentation and bringing awareness to the needs of your country and giving us the opportunity and welcoming us into being neighbors. At this time, we have the opportunity for a little question and answer, and with that, I will ask that you would please use the microphone just so that those who are online are able to hear as well.
Appreciate all your comments. They really hit home in a lot of ways. I have friends in the South Indian Ocean who tell me the same story of being 20 meters above sea level and still being in fear of what is our future. I guess I'm offer a perspective and maybe a question, and that is, you know, God said to Abraham that he would make his people, and he would make the people of his be like the sands of the oceans, as many as. And so we're heading in that direction. We're getting grains of sand called people that demand a certain level of sustenance, whether it be excessive, as we sometimes look around us and see excessive demand in the U.S. and in other Western countries especially, but whereas others live in extreme poverty. But is humanity outstripping the ability of this good earth to maintain us? I don't know where that ends. Are there too many grains of sand in God's earth at this point in time, and is there anything we can do about that? Perspective more than a question.
Thank you so much. I'll take note of your observation.
Thank you for your presentation that makes us aware of these things. But what would you have us do? So much of this is out of our control, or at least we feel it's out of our control. What is the prognosis for your island if life continues as it is now?
Thank you. Yes, of course, climate change or natural disaster in most cases is unpredictable and also unprevented. But it's still under our control, I would say, because climate change, its root cause, is nothing to do with God. It's to do with us. is do with the excessive burning of fossil fuels around the globe that causes climate change. That is the number one causes of climate change. So if you can talk to your politicians to reorganize your economic development that requires a lot of burning of fossil fuels, that for sure is a moral question, it's a moral thing to do on the question of what is ought to be done, is needed to be done. So if you can talk to your politicians around the issue of economic development that really kills the life-giving ability of the earth, I think it's important. But yeah, sometimes, of course, it's beyond our capability and our capacity to respond, especially coming from an island that we have very limited resources, limited technology, limited financial support. We cannot respond constructively. But with the help of other communities around the globe that are willing to provide the support, of course, we can respond as a community, collectively.
I'm struck that it seems in this society and others around the world that the hope to me seems to be in the next generation. And that's not abdicating our responsibility, but I over and over and over see young people setting the example for elders who should know better, because they're going to live in the world that we leave them, and unfortunately, we haven't done a very good job. So educating them, empowering them in ways, listening to them, I think a little child shall lead them.
Thank you, yes. That is very powerful too. Yeah, we should educate our young ones to come up with new ideas that will ensure life continuity on this earth, because we are not just dealing with Tuvalu. If we are to move to another place, climate change will catch up on us. And I'm sure also in the US, you are seeing the change in the climate, either too cold or too hot, too humid. It's everywhere. But lucky you have the facilities, you have the resources to respond to all these different crises. But for us in the island, it's a big weight for us. When there is what you call a tsunami warning, people just do the normal stuff. There's no need to go anywhere. Where do you want to go? It's just a small island. The tsunami will come and get you. So but as I said earlier, it's preparation and being very strategic is very important. So building the capacity of our young ones to understand the logic, the science behind all these climate change activities, it's also important. And especially as a church, as a community of faith, it's also important for us to respond to our brothers and sisters. It is our Christian vocation, not just to love by words, but to provide the necessary support to those who are in need. To your neighbor, not the one next door to you, but who suffer because of us, because of me. Thank you.
I guess I'm going to switch from geopolitics to reality in the islands, and that is at 13 kilometers square, there's not a whole lot of space. Two questions. One is, what have you done in terms of agriculture to accommodate what is becoming more and more a saline solution of groundwater? And have you found ways that you could get salt-tolerant plants to provide foodstuff? And the second question is, I'm not sure what the climate situation is, obviously being near the equator at 4 degrees south latitude, you probably would have southerly prevailing winds. Is there a safe place on the island from what is the traditional wind situation that allows people to have a safe haven, given that you're only, 15 feet? That's the bottom of this this overhang here. Is there a safe place away from the windward usual climatic things going on?
Yes, thank you so much for those two critical questions, because the government of Tuvalu have worked closely with crop agencies in the region on salt-tolerant plants, and I believe that they have introduced some of those salt-tolerant plants in the country as well. But in terms of a safe place for disaster or cyclone, the only safe place in Tuvalu is the church. That's the only building that they have built that is strong enough to withstand some of the cyclones right up until now. But we've been doing some work with communities to raise some funds in order to build evacuation centers. We can use it as multi-purpose centers for education and so forth. But when it comes to disaster, we can use that as an evacuation center. But it did not materialize. And I think the government of Tuvalu is looking into it. Let's just hope it will roll out soon. Because COVID-19, we can quarantine and we can put mask, but we cannot put a mask or quarantine climate change. So we really need to do something quick, as soon as possible. Thank you.
So in the slides that you were showing, does the tide come in and cover the entire island from all those directions that there are directions? I mean, is there any dry spot?
Sorry, if you don't mind.
The tide. There was a slide that showed people just, in what you said, they were caught in the tides of the water.
Yeah.
Does the tide, how does it come in to all areas of the island?
Yes. But that particular slide that I showed was during Cyclone Pam in 2015. There were quite a lot of graveyards were unearthed at that time. And we basically relocate all of them to the other side of the island that is safe. But yes, of course, when there is a cyclone or there is a king tide that comes together with unfortunate situation of a cyclone, it will make things much, much worse than the normal king tide. So, yeah, the whole island is low elevation, so wherever the wave comes from, it still go over the island.
It's so ironic that water is both scarce, fresh water is scarce, and yet there's too much salt water. I'm intrigued by the raised beds. How well is that working so far to get them above the salinity level?
Thank you. Yes, the slide that I show, it was in partnership with the government of Taiwan. But the reason why I saw it, because the idea was around that area. And also, individual communities or individual households also adopted the idea. Not just raise gardens, but they start planting in pots, that they can move around during high tide, or buckets. So they came up with different sort of ideas that it works. But let's just hope it will extend to the future. But we should come up with good solution. But protecting the island is something that we aim to, in terms of building seawalls around the island. Because if we can build seawall, that will ensure the community is safe and agriculture can continue. We can still plant, but in most cases, especially in the capital, where it normally flooded, the seawater just intrude and seep through most part of the island and the airstrip. So it makes things more difficult because the population is right there on Funafuti in the capital. It's more than 5,000 people living on that strip of land.
Mr. Talia, you mentioned that as an opportunity for us to be able to have action, one of those elements is to contact our legislators here. One of the things when we were having our dinner before we came here, there are 3 things that Illinois grows: corn, soybeans, and corrupt politicians. Along with notifying our legislators in this part of the country, is there anything else that we can be doing to be able to support you and your country?
Thank you. Thank you for that very pertinent question, which I think is very important as part of this discussion and part of this trip. I'm not here asking for money, but the question that raised by your pastor is important. Some of the activities that I listed towards the end of the last slides of my presentation, those are something that you as a church can look into it and see what are your interests around those critical issues. Are you willing to support the community in terms of water? Are you willing to support the community in terms of building an evacuation center? Are you willing to support the community in terms of capacity building? It's all depend on you. But I will share the slides with your pastor if you can distribute it to your community as well, to your faith community. Thank you.
I was just curious. Early, you said you invited me to come and live with you for 2 weeks. What would I see in those 2 weeks that would change my thinking about what's going on the islands?
First is the heat. Second, you will eat from most of the imported goods. Thirdly, if you come during king tide, then you can see it to yourself. But make sure you bring a life jacket with you. I'm not discouraging you to visit Tuvalu, but I'm trying to tell the truth.
I think internationally and nationally and at state level and at the community level, we should all be supporting what are called university departments that have to do with climate change as a subject that people should be studying, and they should be doing research on it to deal with the complex problems that I see. I'm just sitting here thinking, like, how do you manage your sewage water and all of that stuff on top of it? But anyway, I'm pro-education and keeping it, making it people aware, and we should be spending lots of money on that and get the politicians to do it.
Yes, thank you.
One of the other things that is, pardon? Okay. One of the other things that comes to my mind is that when we make the trade-off between climate change and our demand for the energy that supports our lives, The trade-off we make is using some sort of fuel to provide the energy that we use for all the things in our daily lives, whether it be in Tuvalu or whether it be in Rockford, Illinois. And the trade-off there is when we go to things like solar, then we have to build batteries that have toxic substances in them. Those toxic substances are derived from mines around indigenous communities that are put at risk because of that process. So unfortunately, while we have a lot of corrupt politicians, we also have politicians, I think, who are honestly looking at trying to figure out ways to balance the issue of why climate is changing due to human activity versus how we mitigate the effects of managing that energy use as we become more grains of sand in God's world. And I respect those politicians for making some of those hard decisions, and unfortunately not all of them are making those decisions, or at least considering those things. But I'm bothered by the idea also that we, in the process of saving, we can also pollute. And it's worrisome, from both ends.
Thank you.
Mr. Talia, we thank you so much for your presentation. Yes, we will be praying alongside of you and the community, and we are called and challenged into action alongside of that as well. So we thank you for your presentation, and we pray you, your family, your country, Godspeed and health, and we look forward to continuing a partnership alongside of you.
Thank you so much.